Welcome back to SwitchCorner. Today we're going to be taking a look at Raji, an ancient epic on the Nintendo Switch. This one, I think it's fair to say, it had an epic trailer at the Indie World event, very much living up to its name, but can the gameplay deliver? That's what I'm here to find out, so hit subscribe if you love the Switch as much as we all do here, join our growing family, and let's get started. So if there's one thing I did love with Raji, an ancient epic, it's gotta be the storyline. Setting the plot in ancient India, I can't deny, super unique. It's not a theme we see often, and it's one I'd love to see explored more frequently. Here we tackle the themes of a lost sibling, a war between gods and demons, and then the lengths we will go to for the ones we love. Here's the story at a very high level. A war broke out between the gods and demons, and in an act of rebellion, the demons, they invaded Earth. During this war, our hero Raji and her brother were separated, and he is now captured by these less than friendly demons. You're out to save your brother Golo while trying to put an end to this war that has absolutely just destroyed your home. I really enjoyed the story, taking the gods of the Hindu religion and then placing them into a setting not too far from the commonly used angels and demons battle. The presentation also and delivery I really appreciated, as it combines cutscenes, voiceovers from gods who are watching over Raji, and then the occasional puzzle or painted mural which you can either interact with or not. These pieces are completely optional, and the story for that reason can be as deep or shallow as you want it to be. Great work on bringing something new, at a story level at least, to the gaming landscape, or at least one we don't see explored frequently enough. So gameplay, and after the trailer I instantly pulled the credit card out and just screamed, "Take my money." Now fortunately I will say here the devs were kind enough to provide me with a copy, but I was more than willing to spend my own cash. It just reminded me God of War Chains of Olympus from the PSP days, and that's about as high as a compliment I can give a game based on its trailer. It's basically a pulled out camera, isometric style, so you can see a large portion of the battlefield, and you go on a massacre as an overpowered hero. Sadly, I'm putting it out there now though, what I saw in the trailer and what the game delivers are a little bit different, and not in a good way. The gameplay loop, it basically comes down to this: explore, occasionally complete some sort of platforming, battle it out in arenas thanks to invisible walls that pop up, like a trope of the genre, and then occasionally solve a puzzle, which for the most part require you to line up images or objects. It's not that the ideas here are bad at all. In fact, the core concept, a hack and slash adventure with platforming and a puzzle, perfect. Sadly though, it's the execution where this one falls down. Let's start with the positive first. So the platforming, for the most part, it's solid. Some of these locations are absolutely huge, and they are, I've got to say, fun to explore. You can literally climb hundreds of feet in the air, you can wall run, and you're basically a master of free running. The ideas too, the moment-to-moment gameplay, the locations you traverse, they mix things up quickly enough, meaning it's always keeping things fresh. Same thing with the enemies as well. The creativity is here, and they will each challenge you in a slightly different way, always keeping you on your toes. Even the weapon selection and upgrade system I enjoyed. You get 4 weapons by the end game, and they each have their own place in your repertoire. Basically think range, close range, more defensive, and so on. Raji basically has you covered. These weapons then, they essentially come with 3 different moves. So think a heavy, a soft attack, and then of course a special, each of them having their own use on the battlefield. The upgrades then as well, they're just that, they're adding to your abilities. At first you're not really going to need them honestly, but towards the end game the difficulty does spike, and you will absolutely require them for success, as enemies will quickly drain that health bar of yours to 0. On the note of the health bar, actually, while I'm talking about it, you can also find pickups in the world to restore that health, and also occasionally enemies will drop it too. Look though, here's the deal though, the 2 big problems: the controls and the performance. First, controls, I am all for a simplistic button masher. That's very much what I expected here, but this reminds me of the first Assassin's Creed, where too much is attached to one button. Here the B button is your dodge, but it's also your jump and your wall run. You have to rely on the game to basically commit the action you're hoping it does. Say you want to run up the wall like a badass, pull off a backflip and execute your foe. Good idea, my go-to move in fact, but if you're not at just the right angle or not quite close enough to the wall, expect to jump all over the place doing a dodge or simply not connect. For me, you really here needed like a jump button, an attack button, and then a dodge button separately. It's simplified, but here it's just gone too far. Honestly though, even with that issue, the first few hours were decent enough, shut off my brain and hack my way through waves of enemies. Then though, the real problem started, and that is the frame rate. I'm going to be honest, I think with this generation of gaming, frame rate has become so much more important to folks out there than it ever was. It's kind of the trend right now in gaming too. It doesn't really bother me too much, honestly. I can live with the occasional drop and not think any less of a game or experience. That said though, sometimes it goes too far, and this is very much that case. Exploration, general movement, even the platforming, it's okay. It's fluctuating typically somewhere between 28 to 31 frames per second, but the combat, the essence of this experience, literally, the game seems to take like kind of a bit of a panic attack. The more enemies you see, the worse it gets. The average frame rate by the end game around 18 or 19. It gets to, and it sucks to say this, borderline unplayable with a seriously noticeable delay between what you are trying to do and the action that is happening on like screen. The idea here is like fast-paced dodging and diving while swinging your weapon of choice, and it just doesn't feel good, progressively getting worse as the game sends you into larger and larger locations and battles. Another less noticeable problem then as well while I'm on issues, occasionally I face bugs at 2 points. Flying enemies just completely disappeared, forcing me to restart the game, and then another, my attack was so heavy it appears to have pushed me outside the invisible walls I was locked within, and I couldn't get back in. Fortunately, my bow was able to kill the enemies there though and allow me to continue. The weird thing with Raji, I've got to say, is the pause menu doesn't have any way of quitting, so your only option when this happens is to fully like close down the game. It sucks to say this, I gotta say, but Raji, an ancient epic, has good intentions and an incredible idea, I gotta say, but it fails to like deliver in execution. If they can lock out this frame rate, then my view of this one will be so very different. But as it stands, I ended up feeling just more frustrated than anything else with this one, and yeah, it just left me overall feeling underwhelmed in the 5-ish hours it took me to beat it. Graphically speaking then, Raji is solid, and I gotta say, thanks to the story, the world you're within, the setting, there's some seriously impressive locations. From underwater like crypts to city streets, each location was always something I was excited for. Then the enemies, while there's not a huge amount of variety in them, they are still very cool, and they definitely nail the, like mystical demon-like nature they are going for. Perhaps most impressively though, the boss fights. These things are epic, they're screen filling. In fact, actually most of the time they're so big the game actually has to zoom out even further. When it comes to animation then as well, solid stuff. In a game like this, they are repetitive on purpose, so you can uncover their tell, work out what their attack pattern is and what is coming next. I wish, I will say, Raji, like our main hero, she had a few more in her repertoire, because they do get a little too like almost robotic towards the end just because you've seen them so many times, but it's still not bad stuff. The best part of the presentation though, by far, finally, the story, which is mostly like auto walking sections, panning cameras, and then like 2D puppets. It was a great idea and honestly implemented into the style of the game perfectly. Outside of the occasional low detailed texture, I think they've done solid work here. It builds a fantasy world while very much keeping elements of it like grounded in reality, and yeah, I was mostly impressed. So audio then finally, and it's decent. The attacks, the fights, they sound solid with the weight you would expect behind them. Likewise, a ton of voice work here from the gods to our hero herself. While I will say it grated a tiny bit towards the end because she does repeat herself a lot, for an indie the acting ain't bad and I just appreciate having it there. Then the music, absolutely suited to this world, but I will say it didn't always for me match the scene. I'd be deep in like an epic battle and the music I did find could be like a little subdued. I think a few more high energy tracks could have been used, but honestly look, that said, it's still a really impressive soundtrack, and you can see the amount of care that went into like matching the ancient Indian setting with the audio. So the final verdict, and this is one I was excited for, the trailer just instantly sold me. It was unlike anything I'd seen in a while, especially on the Switch, and that God of War like style, I think like most, I was just like, take my money. Sadly though, it's the execution where this one stumbles. When you look at this and everything I've said, solid graphics, a mostly decent soundtrack, and more simplistic, the story I really did enjoy, especially the fact they gave you like the optional elements where you could like dig deeper if you wanted to. Sadly though, here the combat is let down by some seriously poor performance issues. This isn't even me talking about the enemies that forced a restart or the moment I was pushed out the arena, but that frame rate, 18 to 19 frames, are just not acceptable for a game that relies on your fluid movement and quick responses. Constantly I died because I lost track of what was happening, and it didn't feel like the game was doing what I wanted it to. It was, by the way, it was just like a second late. It was a second after I actually pressed the button. Today I'm giving Raji an ancient epic, a below average 4 out of 10. I was actually thinking 3 honestly, but I really did enjoy that story and the world is fantastic, so I'm feeling basically a little bit generous. The funny thing is, patch this game though fixed the major frame rate issue, and this will jump up to probably a 7 or so for me out of 10. It's just that rare occasion where the frame rate seriously impacts the game to the point where the fights were nothing more than frustrating and not based on my skill, and the fighting's kind of like the big thing here. It desperately needs to be locked out at 30 or at least somewhere close to that. Thanks for watching. Did you pick this one up? I'd love to hear some other thoughts on this one. If you think I'm right, let me know. If you think I'm wrong, let me know that too. I know one thing though, this game has promise, and with some just minor tweaks at frame rate, it could seriously be a hidden gem. With that, as always, look, a shout out to the patrons for going above and beyond to support SwitchCorner. Truly is appreciated and it helps the channel more than you know. With that then, hit subscribe if you love the Switch, as much as we all do here. Join our growing family, and I'll see you all on the next video. Thanks everyone.